everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Peace, Mind at Health Assured. I'm Sophia, one of the lead counsellors, and today we're not just going to be talking about your mental well-being, but we're also going to be talking about your physical well-being. We all know just how connected these two are, and today we're going to be taking a deeper dive into the connection that these both have, the benefits of physical well-being on our mental health, and of course looking at ways that you can better implement these in your day-to-day. So, back with me again to dive further into this topic. I'm here with one of our wellbeing counsellors, Ade. Hi, Ade. So I know that you have been on the show a few times before, but do you want to just give us a brief introduction about yourself and maybe what really interested you to want to come here and talk about this topic today?
Yeah, so obviously I'm a counsellor, have a background in mental health research as well. And for years, the as you said at the beginning, the correlation between like physical health and mental health, good physical health, good mental health, has been, the data on this is overwhelming.
It's very well documented.
It's very well documented. And the benefits of maintaining a physically active lifestyle, mental health benefits, are just enormous. But there is psychological barriers to people being active. And I've always encouraged my clients, particularly adult clients of a certain age, to be more physically active, not just because of their quality of life and so forth, their health, because of their mental health. How they feel if they did pursue a physically active life. So it's been a challenge, a therapeutic challenge, as you probably well know, Sophia. But I'm really passionate about it because if we don't get this right in terms of like incorporating physical activity into like mental health treatment generally, I think we're missing out.
Of course, yeah. And you're completely right there in saying that you really stress this as a therapist for a reason, right? And I stress it a lot to my clients as well, just sort of like, what are you doing outside of the therapy room, because you're spending an hour here, which is great, but the rest of the time that you're spending is outside of it. So what are you doing outside of the therapy room? And, before we carry on, the point that you said there about how sometimes people can turn off when you mention physical activity, there was just some stats that I wanted to go into before that, but Mental Health Foundation found research that found that 82% of UK adults acknowledge that they know physical activity is important for their mental well-being. But when we have a look at a stat from the World Health Organization back in 2024, they said that 31% of adults and 80% of adolescents do not meet the recommended physical levels of activity daily. So we can sort of see a disconnect. I'm sure people watching this right now are like, yeah, I know exercise is good for me, but they're not sort of it's not sort of being expressed in the other way of people actually doing those things. And I notice it as well sometimes when I mention to my clients, what does your physical activity look like? They're like, yeah, I know that I should be doing it, but I'm not doing it. And I guess we could just start off by talking a bit more about what would you say the barriers people face when it comes to physical activity? Obviously we know, but why are we not doing it?
There's obviously a lot of barriers. First and foremost is time. I did a podcast with you not so long ago about burnout. People being overworked. He said, I think 90% of the nation's burnt out. When you're burnt out, you don't want to do anything, least of all climb a mountain or go to the gym.
Exactly.
So that's obviously a big one. Childcare, the parents. The amount of times you and I engage with clients, particularly women, particularly mothers, single mothers, and say you need to make time for yourself. This is important. The first response is, I don't have time for myself because I've got 2 kids. I've got 3 kids to take care of. I'm not going to go to the gym when I've got to feed my kids. Completely valid reason. The costs as well. It does cost quite a lot of money to pay for access to leisure facilities, sports clothes, and so forth. If you're, someone of a socioeconomic disadvantaged background, that cost just can't be incurred. Obviously motivation as well. I think the motivation is a huge one. Even when the people have time, they still would rather take the path of least resistance. Let's smash my phone for a bit, let's watch television for a bit, let's do this, rather than go out and put my body through physical strenuous activity. So those five I think are big ones.
Yeah.
There's certainly others as well. I think people's early experiences of physical activity as well. When you think about people who work in office spaces, what was their first experiences of kind of physical activity, like PE and stuff like that? If they had bad experiences doing this, it kind of leaves a scar with them. They kind of, whenever they think about physical activity, you think about things that are not good, memories that don't bring them joy. So I think that those collection there of barriers.
Yeah, and you've mentioned a lot of things that stop people from really stopping. There's multitude. People might have had negative experiences in the past of the gym or exercise in general. They have negative connotations that still follow them. Lack of time. Everyone has such busy lives now that it's hard to actually carve the time. If you work a 9 to 5, you either have to go to the gym before work or you have to go to the gym after work. If you miss one of those, then where do you sort of have the time? Are you able to actually have that physical activity? Cost, as you said as well, not just in terms of your time, but also just the actual cost of things. So there's a lot of different barriers that people are facing when it comes to, actually doing those physical activities. And, I guess you mentioned before about motivation being a big factor. And I think that is a big thing now in terms of like how times have changed. But I think that there's a lot more distractions nowadays, and people are always, I guess the way that our mind works is that our mind is always going to pick the easier thing to do subconsciously. If you're going to say to yourself, I'm going to go to the gym for 30 minutes, or I have the option to scroll on my phone or watch television for 30 minutes, most of the time you're probably going to pick the easier option. Yeah,
you're absolutely right, Sophia. And that's the thing with physical exercise in terms of the mental health benefits anyway, is that the harder, the more work you put in, the better the results, both with physical and mental health. If you work with a gym instructor, for example, or any kind of fitness instructor, you want to push you to the point where you're tired, because that's where you get the benefits, both physical and mental health benefits. And the idea of being tired when you're already tired, it's just like,
it's not appealing, isn't it?
It's not appealing, exactly. Yeah. So you are right with respect to the motivation. Those well-trodden paths of relaxing and eating and doing barely anything after you've had a hard day's work. You would probably go down that path, but you have to think about the long-term kind of situation.
You have to think about the bigger picture.
Exactly, yeah.
And before, when we were talking about this before, you mentioned that there seems to be more of a division between mental and physical health, even emotional, psychological health, but we've sort of viewed them as two separate entities. But I suppose we want to start looking at health more as a whole, because one impacts the other. Have you sort of seen that in terms of things like going to the gym and depression? They're basically hand in hand with each other, the motivating factors between them.
You're absolutely right. I think this was a mistake, just viewing these two kind of areas of kind of human existence is different, the mind and body. It goes like way back as well. It's like a concept that's like 500 years old, because rooted in like Western philosophy. How you had this idea that the mind is separate from the body. But it just, as you say, it doesn't exist in biology, this. You view the body as a whole, because the brain impacts every organ system in the body. And the organ system, and every organ sends signals back to the brain to kind of communicate how it's doing and what's happening in those regions of the body. All the data suggests that working on your mental health has to include working on your body as well. You mentioned something about the statistics as well. There was a study done, I think 2 years ago, and it's a pretty authoritative study as well. High quality data, you can rely on it, and it basically reviewed all of the studies focusing on the effectiveness of physical exercise as a mental health treatment. So talking about like mild to moderate depression and anxiety. And like, it's a very, very authoritative study, a huge study, and it found that physical exercise was 1.5 times greater than, in terms of like treating things like depression and anxiety, 1.5 times greater than that of medication and psychotherapy.
That's crazy.
You know what I'm saying? And the authors concluded that viewing this, and it's in the BMJ, the British Medical Journal. So again, a really high impact journal. And it basically said that these findings suggest that when you go to the GP to start speaking about your mental health, physical exercise should be a first line treatment alongside, talk therapy or medication. It shouldn't be considered as like a, do this if you want. There's evidence suggests that, if you do this regularly and, you integrate it into your life in a meaningful way, the mental health benefits would be better than if you go to talk to a mental health professional.
Yeah.
You understand? So it's less like, it's really important. And I think as mental health professionals, clinicians and so forth, I think we should be really emphasizing the importance of this, because it's huge.
I'm glad that you've said that study, because it really stresses the importance of how much you can manage your mental health just by sort of having those, by being more physically active, just how much it can benefit your mental health just from doing it yourself. And I think it helps you to take more control in your life. Because I wanted to say as well, like, I think it can also really impact your self-esteem and how you sort of view yourself. So when we talked about, if you're always picking the easier things to do and you're not pushing yourself, because it takes effort to actually be able to do these sort of things. And, if you continually choose to do the easier thing or the less convenient thing, then it affects how you judge and how you view yourself. So when you actually do push yourself, and when we talk about exercise, I mean, the word exercise emphasizes that it's intentional, but you can also do physical activity unintentionally, right? Just kind of finding those things in your everyday. I think people think, even if, I'm not going to go to the gym because it's cost heavy, it's going to take all this time, but you don't have to go to the gym and actually to maintain good health. It's about, instead of taking the bus to walk, I might do that 30-40 minute bike ride to work, or walk though. I might even take the stairs, just finding things to increase your heart rate every day. And just trying to actively think about how you can do those little physical steps every day. It doesn't have to be something massive. You don't have to be going to the gym 5-6 times a week. Intense, strenuous exercise. It's just, you can literally find it in the everyday activities.
That's one thing we find in our line of work. When it comes to physical exercise or being physically active, if you don't integrate it into your life, as you said, Sophia, it's the first thing to go when things become stressful. You've got to work, you can't, that's non-negotiable. You got your kids, that's non-negotiable. You got your bills to pay, all that kind of stuff, again, non-negotiable. But and you've got this exercise, gym. When life gets stressful, that's obviously the first thing to go, because that's become negotiable. But if you make physical exercise a part of your everyday life, cycling to work, doing something related to walking or cycling or whatever, it becomes part of your daily routine. So it's not knocked off when things
exactly
get work.
Because when we take it away from it and we say exercise, it almost takes it out of your everyday, or it's the first thing to go if something sort of stressful happens. But if you implement it, if you find ways in your everyday to implement that, then it's going to be more part of your routine.
Definitely,
Even things like getting a walking pad. Like, I've seen people that work from home that have bought a walking pad just to get their steps in every day, and that can be like a really great way to...
What is a
walking pad?
I don't know.
They're like it's like sort of like a treadmill.
Oh, but you just...
that you just walk on.
And then you work as well.
Yeah, and then you can work standing desk. That's like one way to get your steps in activity.
Definitely. But I think you can't be too like dogmatic about how people approach physical exercise, because some things work for others and some things don't. So like, I would say they studied not so long ago, and it basically found that when you're talking about sustainability, making sure that this is part of your life over the long term, it found that people who do it regularly, like almost every day, and people that do it in the morning, those are the people that are able to maintain this over a period of time.
Routine,
exactly. And it was found that the reason why, because people say, you should approach it slowly rather than try and do everything at once, and that's a good approach. But in terms of physical exercise, for some people, doing it almost every day eliminates choice. So basically, if you say, I'm doing it 3 times, so I try to go to the gym about 3 times a week. Sometimes I go once a week.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I go no times a week because I've given myself too much choice. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
oh, I'll do it on Wednesday.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, no, I'll do it on Thursday.
100%.
Oh, it's the end of the week.
And I've not done anything.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So people who just it's part of their everyday life now, it doesn't leave room for that choice, so you have to do it. And also I think there was something like, people who do exercise in the morning are more likely to maintain this over time by 300%. So it's obviously by a big margin. And again, it's because you've carved out that space specifically for that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So if you do it after work, the amount of times I get a text from my brother or one of my mates saying, do you want to go to the pub? And I'm like, I'm supposed to go to the gym, but yeah, sure, I'll go to the pub.
Because it's the easier thing to do.
Exactly, yeah, 100%. So yeah, those 2 things have helped people maintain a healthier, physically active lifestyle over time. Doing it regularly, don't leave that much room for space of like choice. And I do it in the morning, but sometimes that doesn't work for everyone. I would never ever get up for a morning exercise routine. I'm just not that kind of person.
Yeah, and it's about finding what works for you.
Exactly.
And I think what I like about that as well is finding the time where you're most motivated, where your motivation is the highest. Like for some people, I know for me, if I don't do it in the morning, I won't do it at all. I sort of like doing it. I go into the day better. I feel more accomplished. I feel better about myself. But for some people, they might find after work to be more convenient. But I think either way, whatever you find works for you, you still have to have that discipline to actually motivate yourself to do those harder things. And I think what can help with that as well is, I thought you were going to go on a point there, sort of saying that you also have to find the exercises that you enjoy.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of sustainability, and that will be something that will help you actually stick to those things. Because if you're doing exercises that you don't enjoy doing, there's not much point in doing them. It's going to really impact your discipline more. So it's trying to make it as easy as possible as yourself to do those things.
I was going to say that's a good point you made there. When I talked about early experiences of exercise, you find that people are kind of scarred by these. If you have somebody who in their adult life likes yoga, likes softer, gentler, body movement based kind of activity, they're not going to enjoy PE where you're playing dodgeball and football and rugby. You understand what I'm saying? So kind of like that leaves a lasting memory on them, a lasting association. Physical exercise is associated with the hustle and bustle of competitiveness and all that kind of stuff. It leaves a lasting memory on people as they move into adulthood and they need to move their bodies more. But it's about finding your own groove when it comes to physical exercise. I found cycling. I'm a cyclist. I discovered that in my early 30s. It just suits me down to the ground. I love it.
Yeah, it's never too late to find something that you enjoy.
100% there isn't.
And I think it's important to try lots of different activities. Like if you feel like you are really struggling with it and you feel like I really hate exercise, I really don't enjoy it, maybe try different forms of activity, right? There's like kayaking, Pilates, yoga, all these different ones, because ultimately we know from the statistics how much it benefits your mental health. Kind of like the study that you quoted there, but I found a really interesting one from the Mental Health Foundation, where they quoted research that people who are inactive are 3 times the rate more likely to develop moderate to severe depression compared to active people. So even just from being inactive, how much more depression can impact you. And as well, they also said as well that regular physical activity reduces depression by up to 30%. And even just looking at that statistic alone, I thought it was interesting, and it made me think just more about how we need to be looking at it more from a holistic approach, right? Because let's say you're not going to the gym and you're also struggling with depression. Not going to the gym is probably going to affect your depression even more. But then there's also it's also on the other side of the coin, because if you are struggling with depression, it is really hard to get yourself going to the gym. So I think that really shows just how connected both of them are, just how connected your mind and body are to each other. So when you are looking after your body, not even in just the physical aspect of things, we know that there's the 5 basics. So good, if you're drinking enough water, you have a good social support group, you're getting enough sleep, you're eating a well-balanced diet, you're being physically active every day, then I think that's something that I really stress to my clients, do you have that foundation? Because if you're not doing those things and you're in therapy, how likely is it that the therapy is really going to take off when you literally don't have a foundation? And it's okay if you don't fully have it, but are you working on it? Is it something that you're aware of right now?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Sophia. And the benefits are immediate. Say if you got those 5, if you implemented those 5 ways to well-being, and you'd start to see the benefits immediately within the next week and 2 weeks and so forth. But the longer benefits are even more significant.
Yeah.
You may think that we've become incredibly health conscious by the rates of gym memberships in this country. Like when I was, in my early 20s, for example, you didn't see this many gyms. Gyms weren't a big thing.
Yeah.
But now you see them everywhere. Clubs are closed and gyms are open. It looks like a good thing, but it's not sustainable. That's the thing. When you see the rates of gym membership, you see huge increases in gym membership, but you also see huge people leaving the gyms as well.
Yeah, people are really sticking to it.
Exactly.
They sign up, but they don't stick to it.
100%. Yeah. And it's just and you also as well with respect to gym memberships, you also see this decline. So you obviously see the highest rates of gym membership among 18 to 24-year-olds, and then with every age group, it just climbs down.
Yeah.
But it should be the way around, because naturally, the younger people are fitter and stuff like that. The more outdoorsy and stuff like that. But, as you grow older, you need to start taking your health a bit more seriously.
Yeah.
But you see a decline rather than an incline. And again, people have really unhealthy relationships with gyms. You go intensely for a period of time. Yeah. Maybe to get a particular body type. And then when they go on holiday or they get a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever, that relationship, you know what I'm saying? So it just, that sustainability needs to be there over time, and it can't be based on aesthetics. Although aesthetics is obviously important to people, it's important to me, I'm sure it's important to you, Sophia, but it should be about health. It should be about the whole body. It should be about quality of life. That's the way it should be understood as. And as well, very, very importantly, and germane to this podcast, should be about mental health, because the benefits are very significant.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And we talked about some of the barriers before, about which is probably why it's declining, people actually going to the gym and attending those sessions for their health. But there's also the sort of aesthetic purposes that people go, and people going because they want to look a certain way. People literally follow certain deficits and for certain plans to get a particular body shape. And I think as a society, we focus too much on that. And we need to be focusing more on how does my body feel rather than how does my body look. Yeah. I think that's a big thing. And sometimes I even see people really judge. I think we can even look at people's body types, maybe slightly off topic, but we sort of look at people's body types and we can judge them, this person looks bigger, they're probably eating this, and I'm I think to myself, what's the actual point in judging them on their body type? What, even if you've established from that this person's health habits, now you've established that, does that help anyone?
Yeah.
Probably not. And I think we need to focus it more on how we feel, because how we feel ultimately about in ourselves, not just physically when we look in the mirror, but how we feel internally, matters the whole way.
Definitely, yeah.
So even if you have something like body dysmorphia, where no matter what you look in the mirror, you're never happy.
Yeah.
And I guess it goes into that point we said at the start about how we need to be viewing it as a whole.
Yeah.
Rather than separate.
Definitely, Sophia, and that's my worry about gym culture, is that it kind of just zeroes in on the aesthetics rather than the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because evolutionary speaking, we weren't supposed to have 6-packs. Fat is good. It keeps us warm, it stores energy, it's good for brain functioning, all that kind of stuff. Having a six-pack for the rest of your life is not a kind of signifier of good health. And to maintain that as well, to maintain that over time, it requires, calorie deficits and stuff like that, sacrifice. It requires not maintaining a good, healthy social life, for example. Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Zeroing in on aesthetics is costly, and it's not sustainable as well. So, that level of intensity of physical activity, you're bound to give in eventually.
Yeah.
And that's going to contribute to all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
Mental health problems as well as physical health problems. So yeah, it's about having a healthy relationship to exercise, and not just throwing yourself in there for aesthetics. And you mentioned something about body dysmorphia as well. I don't know if you know this, but like body dysmorphia used to be a condition that was associated with young girls, basically, who trying to live up to these ridiculous beauty standards that have been propagated by Western media and Western entertainment. But if current trends carry on as they are doing, men are going to be the group that's most at risk of body dysmorphia. Men who go to the gym, muscle-bound, bodybuilding men. Because if you ever, I don't know if I've got a few mates who are a part of this culture. If you be around them, they're constantly comparing themselves to their friends, people in the gym. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They have this idea that they're small when they look absolutely massive.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's become an issue even in these spaces that are supposed to be about health and fitness, because of this attention on aesthetics rather than
overall health. And it's about just reframing the message. So rather than focusing on those sort of toxic ways of looking at your body, looking at your physical health, looking at it overall, we want to start shifting it more to, I guess, the things that we spoke about, moving it away more from gym culture, but trying to implement your physical activity in your everyday, like taking the stairs, walking to work, what other ways?
Cycling.
Yeah, cycling.
Yeah. Standing up at work.
Exactly.
You've got the goes. The elements.
Yeah. And even just things like, I think it's important not to overcomplicate it, but just to look in the everyday things that you can do in terms of your nutrition, making sure that you're just doing things to increase your heart rate every day, I think can be really beneficial, rather than focusing on those other toxic ways.
With respects to diet as well, like this has been a big issue in like particularly mental health from like a feminist perspective, because diet culture has aggressively targeted women, women's insecurities around fatness and stuff like that. And the big issue is that most dieting programs that you see, weight loss programs that you see, 90% of the people that enter these weight loss programs over a space of I think it's 3 to 5 years, return back to their original size when the original weight they went before they entered this weight loss program. And it's because of this fixation on aesthetics.
Yeah.
You're dieting to lose weight rather than eating for nutrition.
Yeah. It's like eating to feel good rather than looking at it
exactly to lose weight. Obviously, we've quoted a lot of statistics and remarked on our therapeutic experience of getting clients to think about physical health more seriously. But in terms of my own kind of mental health journey, so to speak, someone who's in his mid-30s, the best thing I did for my own mental health was start cycling, or start to take physical activity more seriously. I remember approaching my 35, 36, I was just thinking like, I'm past it. I've started to think about slowing down. My body wasn't working as it used to do. My appearance and stuff like that. Just how I felt about it myself.
Yeah.
I started to feel a bit, like I was on the decline, and then I started to cycle quite seriously. And I don't know, I just feel like I've gained 5 years, sometimes 10.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I'm saying?
It literally heightens your life expectancy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you get older, sometimes there can also be that perception of kind of past it now. And I think I can't remember where I read the stat, but it was a stat that people that are obviously you're not going towards that age, but over 60, there's like a massive decline in their physical activity.
Yeah.
It's important to know that this is something that you should be carrying out for the rest of your life. And that's why it's important, I suppose, like as a whole, from what everything that we've said, to find something that you enjoy, not put so much stress on it being exercise, but how can I implement more physical activity in my everyday routine?
Definitely, yeah.
Balanced diet, getting enough sleep, and just establishing that routine more on your day to day.
Exactly, yeah. And you said there about the over 60s. The weekly recommended limit for physical activity is the same for 19-year-olds as it is for 65-year-olds, 150 minutes. Obviously, with the 19-year-old, you can expect a more intense workout, more vigorous exercise regimen, whereas with 65-year-olds, it's still slower and more body movement and so forth. But that time, 150 minutes, you should be aiming for that, whether you're 19 or 65. And again, the physical and mental health benefits are absolutely enormous, eclipse that of psychotherapy and medication. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's going back to that study that you said, and I hope that you've maybe found this a bit more informative in terms of like how it can benefit your physical health and obviously your health overall, which is what we said, and just implementing these in your everyday and maybe changing your perception a bit on how you're viewing physical health to make it more to give yourself that peace of mind and that mental clarity on doing what's best for you for this. Thank you, Ade.
No problem. Thanks, Sophia.